What's on, ladies and gentlemen? My name's Ross, I like games, and today we need to take a look at a very weird Transformers TCG character card. Like, really weird. Like, how is that even a real character? Now, I will confess that my knowledge of the Transformers franchise as a whole is not what some other people's are. I get that. But since when was a hoverboard a transformer? Let me explain. The card, I have no idea about the actual character. Sorry. Now, this was revealed by the lovely folks over at Wreck and Rule. Good dudes, good channel. Make sure you're checking them out, as I'm sure many of you already are. So Private Turbo Board then. It is a Battle Master. And it is a 7-star character, which is around about average for Battle Masters. The stats are honestly not good for a 7-star character. Health of 12, we like, this is good. Attack of 2, kind of bad. Defense of 0, really bad. I am not a fan of the stats of Private Turbo Board. But it doesn't really matter, because it's got a redonkulous skill that reads, your opponent can't play more than 2 cards during their turn. And all of a sudden, I look at the stats and I'm like, meh. Now, to be fair, 12 health, 0 defense isn't phenomenal. It might not last all that long. You've got all the usual tricks for not getting it KO'd, mostly just leaving it tapped to try and put characters off. But you can always play around with cards like Heroism or Bravery or whatever if you want to try and keep it unattacked. But honestly, while it's out, this is a phenomenal skill. Now, it's another one of those that really counters very particular decks. Because if you're playing against a deck that during their turn is going to draw a card, play an upgrade, play an action attack, this isn't going to do anything. But of course, that's not the way it usually goes. There's a million different things that we can do, some that see more play than others. Every so often, we see a deck which has made a little bit of room for Leap of Faith. Doesn't see quite as much play as I thought it would when it was first revealed, but it pops up here and there. Lets you play the top 2 cards of your deck. But then again, maybe that goes into a character. Maybe somebody plays Captain Elita 1 now again. Character that hasn't seen a huge amount of play, but a fairly interesting character. One that I've played around with a bunch, albeit it's not the most powerhouse out there, and it is a rather expensive character at a 12 cost. But when Captain Elita 1 is KO'd, you scrap the top 2 cards of your deck, but you may play them. And of course, if you really want, there's a lovely combo there with I Still Function, whereby you bring her out, you use her for a turn, she gets KO'd at the end of the turn, and then that comes back around. But then we've got the things that see a little bit more play. I mean, if you're playing a specialist deck, you could well end up playing Field Communicator. Field Communicator is a utility, and when you attach it, you scrap the top card of your deck, but you may play it. And of course, if you really want to go heavy into a specialist deck and start playing around heavily with specialist tricks, you've got the multi-cards, multi-tool, and multi-mission gear that let you play an extra action or upgrade, depending which one you play. Cards are very popular right now, and we've got 2 that let you play an extra action card. From Wave 1, we've got Autobot Mirage, and from Wave 2, we've got Bumblebee. But there's no point having a skill that lets you play an extra action when you flip into alt mode if you're not allowed to play a 3rd card. Now, of course, that doesn't mean these cards have no utility. I mean, to take Bumblebee as an example, you can use Bumblebee to play an extra action as long as you haven't played an upgrade on your turn. See where we're going with this? Yeah, there's plenty of decks out there that just don't want to play extra actions or extra upgrades, and against those decks, this isn't really going to do anything. But this gives you a great option. There's nothing to stop you making this a sideboard character. There's nothing to stop you playing a different Battle Master instead, whacking this in your sideboard, and if you're against a deck that's trying to play multiple cards during their turn, you flick this in for game 2, and off you roll. That's where Private Turbo Board comes in. I adore this bot mode skill. It is for some decks more than others, but again, why not stick it in your sideboard? And then if you want to use it, cool. If you don't want to use it, leave it in your sideboard. And if you want a couple more examples, flicking through some deck lists over at vectorsigma.info, we can see that players are using cards like Brainstorm, that lets you play an action, then play another action. Or something like Confidence, which lets you draw 2 cards, scrap 2 cards from your hand, and if you began the game with only Autobot characters, you may play an action. And Anticipation Engine, when you attack, reveal the top card of your deck. If it's an action, you may play it. Although we do need to compare this with stuff like Hunker Down, for instance. Hunker Down lets you attach an extra armor from your scrap pile to each of your tanks when you flip them into tank mode, but the key is Hunker Down is doing that, whereas Brainstorm allows you to play extra actions, which means it's allowing you to play extra cards, and private turbo boards like, oi, no, stop, boo, etc. So Anti-grav Turbo Pack, that's what you get when private turbo board gets KO'd and turns into a Battle Master. It is an upgrade utility, only the second one we've seen so far. It gives you +1 attack and +1 defense, making it one of the very few cards that actually will boost both those skills in one. We like. And it reads, when the upgraded character attacks, and you flip at least 1 orange, 1 blue, after the battle you may play one of the orange or blue cards that you flipped. And then, of course, it is a Battle Master, so if it would leave the battlefield, you put it into your KO area instead. And essentially here, you've got 2 choices for doing so. Although I must point out, I love the delicious irony that the bot mode stops your opponent playing extra cards, while the bot mode, really the bot, whereas the upgrade allows you to play an extra card. And it is important to note, it lets you play a card, not an action, not an upgrade, a card. Now, one of the options here is just to play a mixed deck. Play some orange, play some blue, and just sit there and chill with a mixed deck where you've got a bit of extra attack and a bit of extra defense, and off you go. And that will work quite nicely. And in a mixed orange and blue deck, this is perfect. Because of course it boosts your attack and your defense. And if you're playing a mixed orange and blue deck, you're probably trying to boost attack and defense. So I like it. This is lovely. And then, although not guaranteed, there's a decent chance you'll flip at least 1 orange and 1 blue, and then you get a choice of cards. The other option, and this one's a bit riskier, it might not work as often, is to play mixed icon cards. Now, the only 3 ones we've got are Matrix of Leadership and Roll Out. But what you could essentially do here is use one of these cards that's got one of each icon. Again, these are the only ones that don't have star costs. And then manipulate the deck. So maybe you've got Incoming Transmission. You draw 2 cards, put a card from your hand on top of your deck. Oh, look, it just so happens to be Roll Out. And then you know you're going to flip it when you attack with a character to whom you have attached Private Turbo Board. Or, I suppose, not really Private Turbo Board anymore. He's Anti-Gravity Turbo Pack. I'll be honest with you, this isn't the easiest use for it. You're probably not playing a huge amount of double icon cards, and you've got to have it in hand at the same time you play an Incoming Transmission or draw it off it. Or you've got to be able to plan it. It's awkward, ladies and gentlemen, if I'm honest with you. Doesn't mean it will never work, but it does mean it's a bit more awkward. Certainly, if you're going for a more mixed deck, I love Private Turbo Board. I like that it boosts your attack and defense. I like that it lets you play an extra card. It lets you cheat an extra card out. And I love that before it turns into an upgrade, you've got just a really horrible card, which is going to be directly countering a whole bunch of different decks. I mean, certainly the swap parts deck we all had a little while ago, it got completely wiped out because they banned swap parts. We can do like a little baby version of the deck with Private Red Heat because, well, it's got the same thing, but it's a tap skill rather than an action card. I'll be honest with you, it's not quite as good, but it's still a combo that some people are going to be playing around with. And if you ever find somebody playing that kind of deck, you're like, boom, private turbo board. If you're ever going to a tournament where you're worried that somebody might be playing this deck but you don't know, sideboard it, bring it out if you need to. I like it as a Battle Master upgrade. It's kind of cool in a mixed deck. But I love the bot mode skill. It's another one of these silver bullets where you can go, look, if I'm playing against one of these people who's playing one of these decks I don't want to play against and don't have time for, oh look, it's a silver bullet. And yes, your opponent can take the character out and then have access to everything, blah, blah, blah. But it's going to take them a couple turns to actually do so. And that's where this becomes beautiful. Also, the 12 health makes it very difficult for your opponent to get a turn 1 KO. So there we go, ladies and gentlemen. A very nice Battle Master indeed. But I'd be very excited to know what you think about it. So let me know in the comment section. Go nuts. Be nice. And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, and follow me on Twitter at the Wossy, where we talk about, well, Transformers and any other games that take our fancy. And do consider checking out patreon.com/PTCG Radio, where you can support the channel, get some bonus podcasts, etc. But by far the most important thing, as always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching Wossy Plays.